Welcome to One Day in a Wake Up, a show about doing time, getting out, and where you are now. In prison slang, one day in a wake up means you're almost free. Just one more day before they walk you out the gate. So let's walk out together. One Day in a Wake Up on Colorado Radio for Justice.
I'm going to get started with radioforjustice.org. Do not forget that. If you want to learn about what our team's doing here, remember this, radioforjustice.org. Now, as we proceed to give you what you need, I want to go ahead and thank everybody who tunes in and listens to what we got going on over here. Thank you for coming to One Day in a Wake Up right here with your mans. I'm here for a good time, not a long time. All right. Happy to be alive. Happy to be out of prison. Your co-host, your second favorite co-host, Herb Lex. And to my right, I have who we know as the Red DJ from Buena Vista. My favorite is Super Dad, the first favorite co-host of One Day in a Wake Up, my man, Seth Reddy.
Right on, Herblex. Appreciate that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here on One Day in a Wake Up. You know, the premise of our story is basically to give a voice to anybody who has been incarcerated, whether it be Department of Corrections, whether it be a county jail, whether it be an ICE detainer, whether it be a halfway house, anything where you feel you've been system impacted or spent some time. We'd like to hear your story. I'm here with my new friend, Kyle. Kyle, we'd just like to hear as much of your backstory about what led you into that carceral setting. And if you could focus a little bit on, you know, maybe the night before you got out, some of those feelings. Walk us out the gate, and then, and then we'll move forward to kind of where you're at now and the things that you're doing in your life on this side of the wire.
So my name is Kyle Giddings. I am the Deputy Director here at the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. So my story started when I was in high school, just trying out drugs, trying out drinking way too much for especially a high schooler, and just choosing not to deal with like awful things that happened in my life, that happened to me, happened to my family, and choosing to just drown those in substance abuse. And fast forward, I graduated high school in 2008. Fast forward to 2013. I am deep into addiction. At that point, I had abandoned pills because I couldn't afford them anymore and moved on to just straight up heroin, and was choosing to just drown my life and all the sorrows around that. And that's how I caught my first case. I was like, oh, I don't have any money, better steal to buy my drugs. That's like the thing that makes the most sense to me. And just caught my first case. That's how I did it. And that's how I first ended up in the Jefferson County Jail. My first experience with incarceration was spending a few months at the Jefferson County Jail trying to figure out my life as my case started and progressed. And then I ended up getting probation, went on probation, and got super cocky about my sobriety and got super cocky about what I could do when I was sober, and just fell right back into it. Just fell right back into the old Kyle, and was just doubled down on addiction and stealing to pay for stuff because it was the only thing that I felt like I knew how to do. I wasn't even on probation for a full year before I failed probation. I caught my next case 9 months into probation, and then my next case took a year to resolve, and that's how I ended up in the county jail. For altogether, I did about 8 months in the county jail, and then I was sentenced to 3 years at the ICCS halfway house.
Had you made any, during that stay, had you made any conscious decisions to change your life, or were you still kind of on the wrong path?
It honestly wasn't until I was finally sentenced to ICCS when I realized it was because I went into court the day that I was sentenced and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get probation again. That's what my lawyer thinks I'm going to be able to get. And so I think I'm good. And I get in there and the judge sentences me to 3 years at the halfway house. And I'm like, oh, I am not going on probation. I am not just going back to my life as I know it, everything. And it was kind of in that moment that it shifted for me when I realized I need to like change, because honestly, the DA was advocating to send me to DOC, but the public defender was advocating for probation. The judge landed in ICCS. While I was in jail, waiting to be picked up by ICCS to go to the halfway house is kind of where stuff really shifted for me, when I like started to realize I needed to make conscious changes in my life to change how I was going to live my life. I've always been someone that's really cared about politics and has really cared about like advocating for my community. And even when I was using, I was still trying to do something to advocate for folks. But it was while I was in jail, I was having a conversation with my friend Jeff, just talking about, Pawn Stars that day, what was on the TV. But he made a comment that like, hey, I'm bummed I'm never going to be able to vote again. I was like, why aren't you going to vote again? And he's like, oh, well, I have a felony conviction, so I can't vote. I'm like, and I knew that wasn't true in Colorado. In Colorado, no one's ever permanently disenfranchised. As long as you're not sitting in DOC, you are likely eligible to vote. You can be on parole, you can be on probation for a felony, you can have an old felony from a different state or this state, and you can vote in Colorado. So I started having this conversation with them. I was like, hey, you can vote. And all these other guys in our pod started coming around and were like, well, this is my circumstance. Can I vote? And everything was like, yes, you can vote. And I was meeting guys that caught a felony in their 20s that were now in their 50s that had never voted before, because they were like under the impression of that Jim Crow reigned everywhere and that felons couldn't vote in any election. And so it was like in that moment that I was like, this is what I'm going to care about when I get out. And this is what I'm going to focus on, is like advocating for my community of justice involved or currently incarcerated folks, just period, to be able to have access to the ballot. Because while you're in jail pre-trial, or even if you're sentenced to a misdemeanor, you're eligible to vote, even inside of a jail. And so that's kind of like what shifted my focus. And funny enough, 2 days later, I got picked up by the halfway house. And that was the new focus I was going to take, like moving forward.
Do you remember driving out of Jefferson County and making your journey to the halfway house and some of those feelings? Yeah,
vividly. I remember them taking us out of the pods and taking us down into a room that was maybe 5 by 8. And there was 6 of us going that day. And they just threw our clothes that we wore to court the day we got brought into the jail into the room and told us all to change, and that the bus leaves in 10 minutes. And so I'm sitting there changing out of my yellow scrubs. But the emotions of like suddenly not remembering what cold air felt like, because you're in this like super controlled environment in the jail, even though I was only like, if everything felt like it was going to be different than when I went in, because I had this like new perspective, like, okay, I feel like I actually have a goal moving forward. And so like forgetting what cold air was going to feel like, and then like forgetting what like how to like properly interact with people that aren't incarcerated, or the deputy, or everything like that. And I just remember it's funny enough, the people that were in that room with me at that time were also ended up being my initial roommates at ICCS, because they had this thing called the fishbowl. It's right down the hall from security. Pretty much if you're a new intake, or if you've been regressed from parole or whatever, you end up in this big room.
Was it a 16-man dorm or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Honestly, they probably tried to fit like 25 guys at one point in there.
So you're in the halfway house. You're out of the fishbowl.
Yep.
I know you said a lot of your struggles were with addiction.
Yeah.
Were you doing anything to kind of maneuver through that, or were you just like firm in your conviction of I'm on this path now? Or?
Yeah, I did a lot of work at my time at ICCS. I took advantage of any program that existed there. I had an amazing therapist named Amber, who really took the time to pour into me, as well as like listen to where I was at, and like helped me through so much. And now I've been sober 11 years now.
Nice.
Yeah. It was the people from community and people like Amber who came in that poured into me and allowed me to be my genuine self. And that got me to be able to have 11 years under my belt now. And to anyone listening to this, if you do not have a therapist, get a therapist. It is like 110% worth it.
Yes, be an Amber.
Be an Amber, yes.
So you're in the halfway house. I know you said a lot of your purpose felt, in this voting ethos. So what was kind of your first steps, like in, chasing that vision?
Yeah. So the thing I tell you one thing, ICCS really reinforced the fact that I was like, all right, we got to figure this out. The voting rights for incarcerated folks and formerly incarcerated folks, because I was at ICCS during the 2016 presidential election. And every time I walked down the hall to go to security to check in, check out, do a UA, do whatever, there was this big sign above the security door that said, "It is a felony to vote while you're at ICCS." And I was like, man, that is awful. Here I am, out in community most of the time, working, visiting with friends and family, like turning my life around. But because I was connected to a sentence that involved ICCS, I was not allowed to vote because they considered me incarcerated. And so that, at first I saw as an incredibly demoralizing moment, because it's like, I'm here to do these. I really want to care about people and their voting rights, and I can't even vote myself. During that time, I was able to meet up with Jeff, my friend, out in community, and we got him re-registered to vote, and he was able to cast his vote in the 2016 presidential election for the first time as a formerly incarcerated person. And that moment is kind of what I held on to as
liberation,
being able to have a voice in your community. And that's what I ran with. And so after my time with ICCS is when I was able to really activate and really start pouring into my desire to make sure people's voices were going to be able to be heard through the ballot. My biggest now, huzzah, is Senate Bill 72, which passed last year, which requires in-person voting events at every single county jail in Colorado. And so one day of in-person voting, people who are currently incarcerated will be able to go and have their voices heard in community for the general elections. And I was able to go back to Jefferson County Jail and help them put on their in-person voting event inside of the jail. It was weird. I was in the advisement room where I received my advisement, helping people determine if they were eligible to vote or not. And it was just this amazingly powerful day. Apparently I was able to talk well enough that the commander of the jail walked up and asked me if I wanted to be a deputy, because he didn't know what I was doing there besides doing voting stuff. He was like, "Hey, what do you do when you're not doing voting stuff? What are you doing?" I'm like, well, probably stuff you don't love. Right. With the criminal justice reform. But it was wild to go from someone that was incarcerated in the jail to being asked if he would be interested in being a deputy in the jail.
Huzzah.
Huzzah.
Oh, yeah, that's a great feeling.
Yeah. The full circleness of the journey, being able to go back to the same jail.
Well, good work on that. Yeah, good work on that. You said that was Senate Bill 72? House bills?
Yeah, Senate Bill 72. So Senate Bill 24-72. And so we were able to now pull a lot of the data from the jails from this past election. It's the first time, the 2024 presidential was the first time they did in person in every jail. And so in 2022, only 231 people out of all the jails in Colorado were able to vote. And in this past election, it's 2,400 plus people were able to vote. So almost a 900% increase. It is really great feeling that knowing that I got a long way to go still, because I think people in prison should be able to vote, because 95% of them are going to go home one day. They should be able to say what's going on the school board, what's going on the city council, what's going on in the mayor's race, anything. This is a great first step. And it just shows that people who are incarcerated do want to have their voices heard and do want to be a part of their communities and have, this past election, there was some really awful stuff related to criminal justice on the ballot. And so it was good to know that those folks got to be able to have their voices heard and the things that will directly impact their lives.
And hopefully, this growth, is exponential year after year, and we continue to have 900%
That's
increases.
Right. That's right. That's the goal. I want every person to be able to walk in and cast that ballot. So,
can you think back to the day you were apprehended by law enforcement
Mm-hmm.
And maybe was there any point during that progression through the system that stood out to you?
Yeah, vividly remember the day that I was picked up on my case. I was living in Old Town Arvada, right above a coffee shop, and I had just parked my car, and all these cop cars just swarmed around me, and I was just like, well, I guess this is it. It's like in front of the Elks Lodge in Old Town, so all these little old ladies like wander out and are just watching me get arrested and then go through my car and tear it to pieces. And I'm sitting in the cop car just like, how did I get here? Like, how's this the choice? Like, how is this it for me? And one of the cops comes and sits in the car and he's like, okay, we're going to take you down and like get you fingerprinted and stuff at the Arvada Police Department. And I was like, okay. And it's like, man, this guy seems like really familiar. Where do I know this guy from? Turns out he was my DARE instructor. It's just like, hey, that didn't work out super well for me. I just so you know.
Good job, Teach.
Good job, Teach, on your DARE instructions. It's like, here I am. And he did not say anything to me for the rest of the time. He just sat there and rolled my fingers at the Arvada Police Department. It was just this like surreal thing. You know, you like your whole life, you're like watching TV and you watch Law and Order and you watch these kind of shows and you see these people get arrested and you're like, oh, that's like crazy. I can't believe that would ever like imagine how that feels. And then there I was sitting in my hometown's jail, like going through the system.
That part right there. So that feeling when you get put in a situation where you don't know what the future holds for you now.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Where your life is going to lead to you.
Yeah.
What was that feeling like for you?
Man, I have never reflected on that, so I really appreciate this question. I remember sitting in the cell, and I still remember the color of the walls. They were like this beigey purple kind of color. And the Arvada City Jail, obviously doesn't have a ton of people in it, usually. So I was the only one in there. I'm just sitting in this big room, locked behind, and I had no idea what was going to happen next. I didn't know if I was going home, if I was going to the county jail, or what was going to happen. And I just remember sitting there and like, I don't even know who to call. Like, I don't even know who to call to tell that I'm here. Like, I could call my parents, but I don't want to call my parents. I could call my friends, but all of them would spend their money on dope anyway. They're not going to come bail me out. And so I just remember sitting there and be like, I don't think I'm going to call anyone. I'm just going to sit here and see what happens next. And going through that and then getting picked up and taken down to the county jail and everything. And going to my first advisement hearing and not having someone there to be like, hey, I want to advocate for a lower bail so Kyle can get out. And the phone, I will also always remember that the phone system at the Jefferson County Jail was down. So I couldn't, so when I finally got to the point where I'm like, I'm going to call my parents, I couldn't even call them for 4 days to let them know where I was. I was like off living my life. They didn't like check in on me every day. Mm-hmm. So, but those 4 days, knowing that no one in the world, except for the people in the Jefferson County Jail, knew where I was. And like, I didn't have a roommate or anything. So my apartment was just sat there locked up. No one knew where I was. No one knew what was happening to me. And that just surreal feeling I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's kind of disheartening just because I know what that feels like. Yeah. Man. That hurt for me.
Yeah.
Just hearing that hurt for me.
Yeah.
Because you got kidnapped.
Yeah, 100%. I got kidnapped and put away, locked away. And got now thinking about how great it is to be on this side of sobriety and this side of society of the criminal justice system and know the 5 people I would call immediately. Knowing that I'm such in a different position in life that I would know who I'd call. And I would demand that phone call instead of just sitting and not caring about the phone call. Just different worlds. I would call Christy Donner because if I go to jail, I now know all the right people to call. I know all the lawyers, the bail bonds, not the Freedom Fund folks. I know them all now. So Like, I'm like, okay, I'm set now. I'm never going back. Don't get me wrong. But like, now I know the right people. And my wife, she's wonderful. Big shout out to Erica. She stuck through me through a lot of shit, and she's wonderful.
Well, shout out to Erica.
Shout out to Erica. I try to give her praise. Anytime I'm telling my story, I'm like, everyone needs to know about Erica because she brought me my bag when I was at the halfway house. When I first day at the halfway house, she brought me my bag and she stayed engaged to me and like walked through the whole system with me. I got out of the halfway house 2 weeks before our wedding. And she's like, you got to figure this out because you need to be out for our wedding.
We got to talk to her.
Yeah. You got to bring her down and hear her story. She's a true champion of like loving people where they're at.
So if you can't be an Amber, be an Erica.
100%.
Well, as we're kind of winding up on this one day in a wake up, another question that we'd like to pose to our guest is, kind of thinking back to that moment, you show up at ICCS, you're in this different headspace, you're getting out looking for jobs, say you're heading to the Capitol, working on a piece of legislation and you see this person and their ICCS backpack just got out, what words of encouragement or wisdom would you have to share with this person?
Yeah. While I was at ICCS, I always told people that they weren't alone. Like, the ICCS is a very dark place. Like, when I was there, people were actively going through withdrawals in the halls. And they're like, stay sober while you're here. But, like, this is all happening around you. So it was always, I would always tell people that they're not alone. And there is a community out here that cares for them, that understands what they've gone through or are currently going through and want to just like walk alongside them. And over and over again, that is stuff I've told people while I was at ICCS. And now that I'm on the other side, that's what I talk to folks all the time when I run into people on the street. And it's always interesting when I go into the jails right now and do like voter registration and I run into people that I knew from ICCS and like get to share the same message again with them. I was like, hey, I'm so sorry that this is where we're running into each other, but please know, like, I'm here. Like, I care for you. And there's a whole community of people that are advocating for you and want to care for you when you're ready for it.
Very well put. So yeah, you can be a Kyle also.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about your role with the CCJRC, the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. Kind of looking at life through that angle in comparison to your personal journey. Can you share how you feel about where the criminal justice system is now and where you see it in the future, and what your dream vision of that would be, and if there is in fact a place that we can get where it's criminal justice reformed?
Oof. Oh, man, that is a great question. It's a struggle, honestly, to cast that vision, because something that I try to remind myself is that mass incarceration existed for a long time before me and me joining this movement. And it is more likely to exist for a long time after me, because it is so built into the fabric of our society, is choosing, if it's not black and brown people, if it's not undocumented folks, they will find someone to incarcerate. And so what does a society look like where we can eliminate the power of the folks that get to decide who's the next people we are going to incarcerate? It is hard for me sometimes to be able to see that future and see that world where the justice system has been reformed. But what I know we can do today is nibble on the edges and disassemble the things that they don't know we're disassembling. I think about the fact that, CCJRC has moved so much money from the Department of Corrections back into community. And they think, oh, it's just another program that we can be glorified by. But it's not. What it's doing is it's taking money and putting it where the real first line of justice reform is, which is in the home. It's in the community. It's with our brothers and sisters and with our kids. Community is the front line of the criminal justice system. They're the ones who are at home dealing with domestic violence situations. They're the ones at home dealing with their kids with substance abuse issues. And so if we can take if I can see a world where the money that is currently in the Department of Corrections is funneled back into community organizations that are led by people directly impacted by the system, and they are caring for their communities in the way that their communities need to be cared for, and not just some blanket idea of what caring for community is, that is a reform system. I think prisons will always exist. I think that's just the reality we live with. But we can live in a world where community is cared for and loved for by those who understand the system better than anybody else, and be funded in a way that actually has an impact. It's just not people chasing grant to grant to try to survive. It'd be a constant flow of money from the state or the feds into community, where community gets to make the decisions on how they want to love each other and care for each other. That's my vision for the world. And the day where the DOC's budget is half community reinvestment is my reformed system.
And I would 100% vote for that. And I think, probably everybody that's been impacted by our system would vote for that. Yeah. And so hopefully we can align these two visions and, vote
one day
yes
at a time
on Prop Kyle.
Yeah. One day at a time. We're going to do it one day at a time.
Yep. Nibble away. Well, thank you so much for being so candid with your story.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you guys and all the work you guys are doing. Being able to get these stories, our stories, and the stories you guys interact with out into community is what's going to change the heart of the people that aren't involved with the system right now. So keep up the work.
So thank you, man.
Thank you. Well, thank you to everyone out there that joined us, listening to Kyle's journey through his one day in a wake up. Thanks for tuning in. Like Herb Leck started the show off with, we appreciate you guys' support. Check out radioforjustice.org and tune in soon for some new content.
No return. It took a couple round trips in order for me to learn, and I ain't never going back. Allow me to be exact. You let pain run its course till you're forced to adapt in the worst habitat. Speaking matter of fact, zigzagging through this maze with my brain still intact. Progress is the phase, the rest is just cap. What lurks after that? Fresh air don't care when you spent light years in a prison, shifting gears with the friction and the tears. Addictions in the rear, model for your peers. That's the sum of all fears. This is not a hot take. One day in a wake till a steak on my plate. Kiss from my mate, life reanimate. Exist to be great. Let your thoughts elevate. Bend but don't break, cause your past and your future can no longer correlate.
One Day in a Wake Up is a production of Colorado Radio for Justice. Check out CRJ at radioforjustice.org and across social media at Radio for Justice. This episode of One Day in a Wake Up was produced by me, Seth Reddy, alongside Taylor Hanson and Herbert Alexander. Executive producers for this show are Ryan Conero, Herbert Alexander, Taylor Hanson, and myself, Seth Reddy. Our theme music is by Herbert Alexander. This is One Day and a Wake Up.